So welcome, my name's Jaime Contois, and I'm a member of the Putney Huddle. Laura Chapman was supposed to open us out, and I'm going to be a filler. She may speak up when she reconnects and talk a little bit about this forum, but the intention was that the Putney Huddle has hosted since about 2017, various government and candidate forums that have allowed for Putney residents to learn more about folks prior to elections and to hear about them when they're in office. So we want to welcome Meg Mott. She's the moderator this evening. She's a professor of politics and also the town moderator for the town of Putney. And we want to thank the candidates that are here tonight, Eric, Tim, and Charlie. And we ask that everyone please name themselves, first and last name and your town. If you're interested in learning how to rename yourself, you go to the top right corner, you hover your cursor over the screen where your face is showing. To the top right, there's three buttons or three dots. And you click on it, and one of the choices is rename, and you can just type into that field and click OK. Laura, you look clear as a bell. All I said was Putney Huddle's history, and all I said was Meg Mott is our moderator, and ask people to rename themselves. So if there's additional stuff you want to say, please do.
Did we talk about early voting and ballots and all of that? No, was that, can you hear me
No,
now?
we did not talk about any of that yet.
Okay, great. I will jump into that real quick. So early voting began February 9th. Ballots have been mailed out. If you did not receive a ballot and you would like to access one, please reach out to our town clerk, Jonathan Johnson. You can also vote anytime in person at the town hall during regular town clerk business hours. And the polls will be open from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Tuesday, March 1st at the Putney Fire Station. There will be no town meeting this year. Instead, there will be a town meeting info session on February 26th at 10 a.m. and the Zoom link can be accessed on the town website. Great. That will go over ballot questions, and then we already introduced Meg, I assume. Great.
Okay, so it looks like we're ready to get started. Thank you very much, Putney Huddle, for organizing this, Laura and Jaime. This is very helpful, I think, for Putney voters to have a sense of the three candidates who are running for one select board position, and that is on the Australian ballot, as Laura and Jaime mentioned, and you can pick up those ballots if you didn't have one mailed to you already. And just some very basic rules here. Right now we have a fairly small group, but there may be others who join us. After each of the candidates has introduced themselves, given us a sense of why they are running for the select board, we'll open it up to Q&A. And I would ask that people, if possible, to use the raised hand function, and that you can find at the, I believe, on the participant or on the reactions, depending on what kind of Zoom you are using. But at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to access a function which is an electronic raising your hand. And when you do that, then I will be able to recognize you, and I will recognize people in order of when they raise their hand. We're not going to use the chat function here tonight. However, I think with the exception of if you run into technical difficulties, that might actually, and I'm saying this now for the first time to Jaime and Laura, who will be seeing the chat. If you run into technical difficulties, go ahead and ask for some help there around the electronic raising hand function or something of that sort. But other than that, we're going to ask people to participate using, or another option is you could turn on your video if that's possible and raise your hand like this. So I just wanted to be able to get people's, so they can get my attention. As I think Laura was probably saying before, her connection gave her such a hard time. This is a forum, an open forum. And with all public forums, I'd ask that people treat each other with respect, to assume good intentions on the part of all speakers, and to try and listen to one another. So as we hear from the candidates, if you've asked a question of one candidate and then you're asking it of another, because this is a group who's trying to weigh and consider decisions on their ballots, any way you can reinforce something that you've already heard can be helpful, just as a way of keeping some of the differences alive. It's a great thing that we have three candidates because they may have different perspectives. So that's all I have for my preliminary remarks. Very excited to do this tonight. And so let us begin, and we'll go in alphabetical order by the last name of the candidate. So that puts Eric McGowan. Are you able to open up your audio, Eric, to let us know a little bit about why you're running for the select board and other matters about your candidacy? Eric, we're not hearing you. Are you able to speak tonight?
If you're on the phone, Eric, I believe you have to do *6 to unmute and *6 to unmute and mute. So you might have to do that on your phone.
So I'm thinking maybe we'll give Eric some more time to work out some of the technical difficulties. And Eric, whenever you're are you there now, Eric? So if you come back on, then after Tim Morris has spoken, then I'll turn back to Eric. So Tim, would you like to tell us why you're running for select board?
Sure. I'll just give a brief introduction first. Hi, my name's Tim Morris. I've lived in Putney since 2014. I hold a law license in Massachusetts, but I've been largely acting as a stay-at-home parent for the past few years. I have two daughters who are both 10 and 6. I served on the school board, the Putney school board, in sort of 2018 to roughly 2020 when the Putney board dissolved. And I was elected to the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory District Board in 2019 and served essentially a one-year term, although it wasn't elected till May, so it was a little less than a year. Anyway, I decided to run in large part. I had gone to the select board page because I was interested in putting a ballot question on for town meeting day regarding retail cannabis. And I had reached out to Eileen Chute and then got sort of transitioned to the town manager and the clerk. And I was just curious to see whether the select board had discussed the retail cannabis vote in general on their own. So I went into the minutes, and the first one I happened to open, I was sort of scrolling through it and found the select board talking about the proposal to expand the select board from 3 members to 5 members, which I had sort of heard about, but I hadn't actually seen. And I sort of made note of a few things with it. One, I noted that the select board sort of noted the difficulty in filling some of the volunteer positions on the advisory boards, and that the board seemed to be expressing the opinion that they were concerned that if the board were to expand, no one would run. And I sort of, I don't know, was a little surprised by that, and also a little concerned, I would say, because I was a little uncertain whether a personal opinion was being expressed or the opinion of the board, which struck me as a sort of a troubling thing to me. but also I think disagreed in a sense with the idea that no one would run, in part because I thought, well, if you're saying no one will run, maybe I'll run. So the next thing I knew, I was on the Vermont League of Cities and Towns website looking at their guide. And I found myself about 50 pages into the guide, reading through it, when I thought, it seems like you're setting yourself up to run for select board. And I sort of discussed it briefly with David and with Eileen and got a little bit of a sense of sort of their experience of being on the board, which sounded similar in some ways to the sort of merged board. And from there, I sort of decided to run and was very pleased to hear that I would, have fellow candidates running, because obviously that was part of what motivated me in the first place. And I imagine may have motivated other people, though I don't know. That's about it.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Tim. Eric, are you able to speak now? We see Eric's name. Seems like he's not muted, but we have been having some technical difficulties. So I think I'm going to move to Charles Raubicheck, and we'll turn to Eric after Charles has given his introduction. So Charles, would you like to explain to the voters of Putney why you are running for the select board seat?
Yes. First, I'd like to thank you and Laura and Jaime for having us together here tonight, and an opportunity to discuss issues relating to the town, and also to meet the folks who are with us and who hopefully will have some questions. Just a little background. I'm Charlie Raubicheck. I'm originally from New York City. I went to college and law school at Georgetown in Washington, D.C. After that, I spent a few years at the Food and Drug Administration in Washington as a trial lawyer. And then I spent over 40 years practicing law in New York City at a number of firms. And I also taught food and drug law at New York University Law School for 30 years. The reason that I'm interested in being on the select board is my desire to essentially get involved with the community in a meaningful way that I can bring my legal background to the issues that the town has to deal with and is dealing with. I think I've over the years, based on what I've done, is developed some balanced, sound approaches to issues that are important. They were important to my clients. They were important to the government when I was at the FDA. And I think I can contribute those skills to our town. I've lived here since 2007, part-time at first on weekends, and since 2016, full-time on West Hill Road near the Putney School. So I look forward to this election, and hopefully things will work out.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Eric, have you been able to solve some of your technical issues? Are you able to speak?
What's this? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
There we
Thank
go.
you, Eric. So that's wonderful. Are you able to tell the voters of Putney why it is you are running for the board, for the select board seat?
Guess pretty basic, kind of like the other guys. I got an interest in it. I've had a lot of community work in Putney with involving the fire department. I'd like to take it to the next step and see what offer with the select board.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a thing also to step up, because there's not a lot of people stepping up for certain spots, and I figured, well, I'd give it a shot. So lived in Putney all my life, and I'd like to be part of the decision making in town.
Great. Thank you very much. And I don't mean to cut you off unless if there's something else you want to say. That's beautiful. Okay, great. Thank you. So we've heard brief introductions from all three candidates. And at this point, feel free to raise your hand electronically or turn on your camera so that I can see you. And you may ask a question to either one specific candidate, or you may ask a general question to all three. I'm asking candidates to be somewhat conscious of the time. If you can keep your answers to under 2 minutes, that would be great. But I also want people to have a chance to explain their positions. So is there anybody here who has a question for our candidates? So maybe while we're waiting for people to formulate their questions, I have a general question for all three candidates. And that is, what do you see as one of the central concerns facing Putney's Select Board in the upcoming future? And maybe we'll stay with the alphabetical order for now. Eric, do you have a response to that question?
Guess right off the top of my head, I'd probably say budget-wise. Trying to keep taxes down and services, you know, so the town has good services, but the tax rate doesn't go out of sight.
Great, thank you. Tim, what are you thinking?
I'm probably thinking something somewhat similar. I know that I'd heard that there was some budget issues around the highway repairs, around the road repairs because of the storm last June. And it sounds like that's probably going to be an ongoing issue.
Great. Charlie, do you have?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that one of the issues that the select board could certainly assess is the revitalization of our center of our town. And of course, ideas from our citizens, voters in this regard would certainly be key. As you all know, we've lost a number of businesses in quote unquote downtown Putney due to a number of factors, including the Great Recession of '08, including Irene, and a number of storefronts have stayed vacant. And I think it would be in the town's interest, certainly spearheaded by the select board, to develop a plan to essentially address this. And there are, I realize I got a time limit. So with respect to a future question, I probably could indicate some of the ideas as the way I think this ought to be done.
Okay, and Charlie, I think that's a lovely way that you've handled the time crunch. I'm putting on a list that some questions about business development, it sounds like, would be appreciated so that you could have a chance to offer people some more details. I noticed that we have a question in chat and it's for all candidates. Do you have any thoughts on whether there should be a 3-member select board or a 5-member select board? Just to mix things up a little bit, let's go in reverse order. So Charlie, do you have any thoughts on that issue?
Well, I think that there are arguments pro and con to that. I think the current select board is functioning quite well. We have 3 able members, and kudos to David for his 3 years of service. And I think they're doing a commendable job. But the workload is tremendous, as I'm sure they would all agree. And perhaps enlarging it to 5 would help balance out what the select board does. In addition, we've got a town of 2,000 or so folks. it may be useful to have additional representation of people who want to get on the board, who haven't had that opportunity because of the number. I mean, I know that Newfane's got 5. I know Mike Lewicki was kind enough to send me a letter when I ran for the board last year, thanking me for running and indicating that he thought maybe going to a 5-person board in Putney would be a good idea as well.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. Let's turn to Tim. What are you thinking about this question of 3 or 5-member select board?
I'm pretty strongly in favor of expanding the board to 5 members. I really see the opportunity for more voices on the board as a good thing. I understand there's some concerns about it, but I think over time, some of those concerns would probably work themselves out. I'm not saying this is actually a problem, but I did note that when there was a recent discussion about Sand Hill Road, that the 3 current members of the board all live on sort of in the central part of Putney over by West Hill or in that general direction, and that there are currently no East Putney board members. And I think having 5 members would increase the opportunity for people from all parts of town to have a say on the select board itself.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Eric, do you have any thoughts on this question about 3 or 5-member select board?
I would definitely be in favor of 5. Like Charlie said, there's definitely pros and cons to it. I think it'd work itself out and more people, has to be on the board.
Great. Thank you, everybody. It looks like I have a question from Jaime. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, I've been curious this past couple of years. There's been some dynamics that have popped up in the community that I really, I recognize that there's a real need for ethical and professional human resource processes to be brought into town government. And so I'm curious what your understanding is of human resources and understanding equity inclusion within the context of supporting organizations to expand their ability to deal with complex challenges within personnel. So I'm curious about that.
Let's go in the order, alphabetical order for that, for Jamie's question about concerns about professional, having a professional HR approach, specifically around diversity, inclusion, and equity. Eric, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would agree that there is a total definite need for that, especially the HR part of it.
Great. Tim, do you have any thoughts?
I think there's always a sort of a need for open and good, sort of a good governance approach with a sort of open and equal playing field for in hiring.
Great. And Charlie?
I definitely support the Equity and Inclusion Committee and the efforts they've made to advance this in terms of our consciousness. Personally, I've been involved with several churches which have embraced equity and inclusion in their membership. One is the Riverside Church, which is a fairly well-known church in New York City, where over half of the congregation was African American and other people of color. I also have been on the board of elders of a church called the Lafayette Avenue Presbyterian Church in Brooklyn, whose initial pastor was Theodore Cuyler, who worked as an abolitionist with Lincoln and with Henry Ward Beecher. So I don't want to say I've got quote unquote lived experience here, but I'm certainly I'm certainly for it, as everyone that I've talked to about this has been.
Mhm. Great. We have a question that's come in from Mike Merwicki. He asks all candidates, how would direct civic investment with the 700,000 plus in ARPA funds Putney received from the US government? So how would you direct these federal funds that Putney has received? And maybe I'll go in a slightly different order, and I'll start with Tim this time. Are you are you able to define for people what the ARPA funds are? American Rescue, I believe, is that I think what Mike is referring to? Yeah, Tim, any thoughts? I know I threw you a fastball.
I had not specifically thought about this up until this moment. I think I would certainly be interested in hearing sort of proposals from the community for proposals to the select board of what people would ideally want to do with the money. At this point, not having been elected, I can't say I've given it that much thought. That to me was super high on my radar at the moment.
Great. And so Mike Merwicki explains that he can't fully participate. If at some point, Mike, you want to take some time just to explain a little more detail about those ARPA funds, that might be useful. But I'll see if Charlie first and then Eric has any thoughts on federal funds that may be coming down the pike to Putney. How would you direct that?
Well, is this part of the infrastructure money that's coming from the feds? Okay. Well, maybe. Well, if we get that much money, it seems to me that there are improvements in the town that could be made. For example, the sidewalk issue on Kimball Hill, where the sidewalks need either repair or installation or both. If those funds could be directed elsewhere, I would support, as I mentioned earlier, that the town adopt a plan for investment in bringing new businesses to downtown. And one area that might touch upon is this affordable housing project that's been discussed, where some housing of 25 or so units is being proposed. It was proposed to the DRB, Development Review Board, this week, and we had a 4-hour hearing on it. And one of the thoughts I had, well, if this goes through, we're going to have more people in town, and people who can engage in town, people who want to patronize not only our existing businesses, but also newly created businesses, to make it more vibrant. I mean, we should be proud of this community. We've got world-class arts organizations here in Yellow Barn and Next Stage. And we've got the oldest general store in the state. There's a lot to be proud of. And so, let's look for opportunities to make the center of our town and our people employed and contribute to the general welfare. I know that sounds general, but that's what I've been thinking about.
Great, thank you. And Mike did clarify that the ARPA is the American Rescue Plan, and thank you, Doug Grant, who's also, it's actually not part of the infrastructure. That's a separate bill that went through Congress. But let's turn to Eric. And do you have any thoughts about federal funds coming to Putney? How would you like to see them spent?
I guess I really wouldn't know right off the bat. I haven't thought of it much, but I'm sure there's a lot of good places they could be used in town.
Great. Okay. Do I have any other questions coming in? I'm able to look at chat, and if you raise your hand electronically, Doug Grant, yes, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
So this is a really mundane problem-solving problem, just to see how people respond. I live at 88 Main Street, which has 140 feet frontage on Main Street. It's basically has been used as a parking area for Edel's stained glass. So what happens is people use my area to do U-turns. And somebody actually pulled in and hit my car once. And they came to Edel's door and said, I'm sorry, I hit the car from Florida. And so, but here's the thing. I realized after that there's really no place to do a U-turn unless you know the town. There's a couple places and you really have to know the town. So I'm thinking, how would these three candidates solve the problem of people out of town not knowing how to turn around?
Yeah. Okay, there is a
Or a
very
big rig.
concrete problem. Yeah.
Or a big rig. If a big rig came in, what would it do?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Doug, for that very concrete problem-solving question. Let's go in reverse alphabetical order for this one. And so we'll start with Charlie and then go to Tim and then Eric. I think, yeah.
Well, that's a good question, Doug. I hadn't quite thought about this issue. I do know that there's what you're describing. I think it's that little area where you can park across from the post office, unless I'm mistaken. But even if it's not,
I'm right across the street from Swirl. And
Okay.
Swirl has signs that says no turnaround. The family healthcare has a sign that says there's no turnaround. So people are just out of luck. I mean, if I put a sign up that this is private property, they're out of luck.
well, I suppose that I would ask the select board to consider appointing a committee to look into this and get, number one, get a professional engineer to come in and take a look at Main Street and see if there's an appropriate place that this could be done without disrupting traffic on Main Street too much. It may very well require certain construction right off the road to get enough space in order to accomplish this. I would perhaps develop some sort of a survey mechanism to talk to people along the Main Street stretch to see if folks had a particular place that they have in mind for constructing such a, for want of a better word, roundabout. And having done that, have this committee, doesn't have to be a lot of people, formulate some thoughts and recommendations to the select board to see, number one, whether this is feasible, and number two, what's the best place to put this.
Great. Thank you. Tim, do you have any thoughts on this traffic problem that Doug has described?
Sure. I've certainly noticed Doug's house before in the sort of, I don't know, attractiveness of attempting to turn around there. I'm blessed with a car with a good turning radius. But, what I have to think of is thinking of the sidewalk project to Landmark College and just how expensive that seemed to be. And just trying to envision if there were going to be some sort of official turnaround spot in the village, where that would be exactly, just because of the crunch that currently exists. And my understanding, I believe that's not a state highway through the Main Street section, but I think whenever it involves a state highway, it gets awfully complicated with who has authority and who would have to sign off on it. And I don't really have a good answer on that, just because of trying, especially when you mentioned a big rig or any kind of large truck. that's difficult to envision where that would happen exactly.
Right.
I think currently the only two spots to turn around with a wider area are sort of at the end of Old Station Road and the spot that I think Charlie mentioned right across from the post office. That's usually where I do my U-turns. But I don't have a good answer on that, really. Sorry.
Mhm. Thank you, Tim. Eric, do you have any thoughts on the traffic issue and U-turns in downtown Putney?
Definitely sounds like an issue, but I think even if you came up with something, people are going to just turn around where they want to turn around.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to, just common sense. Nobody's going to, they're going to do what they want to do without blocking it off or putting a sign up. Fortunately, it's probably just open to getting used as a turnaround.
Got it. Okay. And Doug, I'm going to put you on hold just for a minute because I have a couple more questions, and then so I'm going to go to these questions, and if we still have time, I'm going to turn back to you, Doug. But the next question that I have in the queue here on chat is Norman Parody has a question about broadband. And let's go in starting with Eric and go in alphabetical order this time. Eric, do you have any thoughts on broadband in Putney?
I don't, besides it would be nice to increase it. But other than that, it's not something I keep up with. Not my forte.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Eric. I'll turn to Tim.
Maybe that would be a place where using ARPA funds might be appropriate. I'm not sure if that would be usable for that, but given that I did a quick Google search while I think Charlie was talking and saw that it was sort of economic recovery funds around COVID, that maybe some of those funds, should they exist, could be put towards expanding broadband access.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And Charlie, any thoughts on broadband?
Yes, this is an interesting question. When we first moved to Putney in 2007, the internet capability was virtually nil. We had an experience with Fairpoint Communications, which is a spin-off of AT&T, I don't know, Verizon. You couldn't get decent internet on West Hill Road. There was a little station, they said, downtown someplace that controlled the broadband. But they said, well, we live 500 yards behind the area that this could cover. And so our internet got to the point of being zero to extremely slow for a long period of time. And finally, Consolidated Communications showed up one day and they put a decent piece of equipment at the corner of Aiken Road and West Hill. And lo and behold, we came into the 21st century. But that's not what I read about in other parts of Vermont, that broadband is still sorely lacking. And if some of these funds, as Tim mentioned, could be devoted to expanding broadband, certainly with the existing communications companies in the state, that would be wonderful. It probably would also, and I'm sorry if I'm going on too long here, but I just want to get this one more thought in, to attract people to come and live here in our state. We've got to have decent broadband. In other words, in addition to servicing the folks we have now, if we want to increase the economy, if we want to increase the tax base, people will consider Vermont if they like everything else about our state, but they may not come if broadband continues to be compromised in certain areas. And particularly during COVID, when remote work has become, I don't want to say the way of the world, but it's pretty prevalent across the country. You've got to have adequate broadband in order to have services as businesses as well as individuals be in the modern world for communications purposes as well as others.
Great. Thank you very much. So we have another question. This comes from, I believe, John Field. And the question is, could all three candidates explain their view on the several articles relating to marijuana sales in town? I'll start with Tim Morris on this, and then I'll go to Eric and then Charlie.
Well, I was one of the people who circulated the petition to put the question on the ballot. So naturally, I am in favor of predominantly, and I'm forgetting offhand which ballot number this was, the question, the straight retail sales question. The second part about integrated licensees was sort of added, I think, by the clerk. I think it probably at the direction of other towns' clerks at the time. I'll just say as quickly as I can. I didn't quite understand what it meant at the time. My understanding is that really refers to existing medical marijuana dispensaries. That's the only licensees who will be eligible for those licenses. So it doesn't really apply to Putney, but I am in favor of retail sales in Putney, primarily just as a way of drawing more business into town. I think in other states you've seen that people come off the highway with cash to spend and make fairly large dollar purchases. So I would sort of imagine it may bring additional tourists in off of the highway who want to make purchases before they continue north. That's a little complicated in that Massachusetts is a sort of existing market and many of those tourists would be coming through Massachusetts. But, you know, hopefully that would draw some business into town, would be my hope. That's my view.
Great. And just to interject here, we will be discussing these two articles at the information meeting on Saturday, February 26, Articles 6 and 7. But we'll appreciate this question, which is very much like, what do the candidates think about it as well? So there will be a further discussion on the actual articles on Saturday, February 26, our Zoom informational meeting. But let's hear what the other two candidates have to say. Eric, what are you thinking about this?
I haven't heard of, I've talked to a few people about it. I don't know a whole lot about it, but it definitely seems like a good thing as far as I've heard. And bringing, like Tim said, bringing the business into town, that's a huge thing.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Eric. Charlie, do you want to weigh in on this?
Sure. I agree with both Tim and Eric that offering retail availability of marijuana has the potential of bringing folks into the town. I think that certainly from a medical standpoint, having medical marijuana available to people in the community with appropriate medical supervision is something that I would favor even more than retail sales because of need for this type of palliative care among our elders, including me. Although I don't need it and I haven't tried it, but certainly that's a legitimate purpose that I would favor. If you go back to the retail situation, you're obviously going to need a license there. I confess that I am not up on the requirements for these licenses, but because the state has supported this with appropriate regulation, I think we could do it here too.
Great, thank you. Is there any other questions in the queue? I don't see anything, a question. I'm looking for questions. So I may turn back to Doug because I know he had something before Doug, Ted, I've got Ted. Sorry, Doug, do you mind being just a little patient? Yeah.
I'm thinking about the turnaround question is connected with the parking question in downtown Putney. So there's not a proper parking area in Putney. And if there were, that would be a logical turnaround area. And parking is a problem anytime there's a big event at next stage. And if we want to bring new businesses in, the parking has to be very predictable. So that's not a question so much as it is a point to make.
Yeah, so something to further add to this discussion. Janice has her hand up, and then we're going to hear from Doug.
Thanks. I just wanted to go back a bit. See, I saw that Mike's on the call, Mike Mawicki, and I'm wondering if he has anything to offer with regard to the internet. I know the state is working on some things, but I don't know what and what the time frame is. So I'm wondering if he has anything he could add to help us understand what help we might be getting.
Mike, are you here and able to weigh in on this? I know you sent a chat that you're also at work, so you may not be able to participate. It sounds like that's something that will have to be answered at another public forum. He's saying we'll answer in chat. So Mike Mawicki will have some answers about broadband, it sounds like, in chat. Doug, you've been so patient. What did you want to jump in here?
So initially I had a solution, but I now have a second question.
Great.
Excuse me. The thought I had was to put a sign someplace and say no turnaround except at old Route 5 South. So if you're coming either direction, you could go that way around to Carroll Browning and loop around by the co-op. Or go around Christian Square and Mill Street, which would not be as suitable for a big rig. In fact, I don't think turning at the swirl is suitable for a big rig either. But a big rig, as Jaime said, took out the River Valley awning there. So a big rig's a problem. Now, tying this in with the parking, the only thing I can think, the solution to that would be to take out the entire Christian Square and make it a parking lot, which I'm not recommending. So we have a conundrum. Now, my second question has to do with my 140 feet of frontage. I wanted, when I moved in here, to put in a garage, and I created a plan for a garage that would include solar panels. The solar panels on this house is not a good idea because I'm going to have to replace the roof at some point. So I figured, well, I'll just build a garage or a carport with a south-facing roof, and that would then get my car off the street. But in exchange for that, VTrans wants me to seed my 140 feet in lawn. So if I put, and I can't put barriers because the easement comes onto my property, but they want it seeded in lawn. So people turning around on a lawn is going to ruin the lawn. So there's got to be some way to solve that problem. So the question I have for the candidates is, if you, and this is mainly a planning commission issue, but I want to know your opinion. If I put up a plan with solar panels on the south roof of a garage or carport, would you consider that feasible, acceptable? And I won't say any more at that. I just want to hear your views on solar panels on Main Street.
Let's start with Tim on that, and then we'll go to Eric, and then finally Charlie, and then I have another question from Heather Small.
I'm not really aware of any permitting issues around it. I mean, I can imagine there might be some. My personal view of solar panels on Main Street, I certainly am not opposed to them. I'm not really sure what to say on it beyond that.
Great. Eric, do you have any thoughts on that?
Same as Tim. I'm not opposed to them at all. It's a house, your garage. You should be able to do what you want with it.
Great. Thank you for your succinctness. Charlie, do you have any thoughts on this matter?
Well, I certainly do not oppose the use of solar panels. Certainly Main Street, you have to consider the existing boundaries, sidewalks, etc. It seems to me that one way to handle this would be to put together an application for if a permit is needed for that, and go before the planning commission or the development review board, working with a consultant and coming up with a consensus as to the number one, the feasibility, and number two, the desirability of having solar panels in that particular location. Now, by saying that, I'm not prejudging this issue, but certainly not ruling it out. It's I think it's probably more of a complex, I want to say complex project that would have to be thought through. But if you wanted to put solar panels in, Doug, I think you ought to pursue it. And one more thing, I don't mean to go over time, but as a supplement to your first question about the turnaround and the parking, next to the firehouse, there's an area where there could be an opportunity for a turnaround and or more parking. As a matter of fact, the application to put up this affordable housing that came before the DRB this week had a proposal to put some parking over there. Maybe it could be worked out that certain of that parking could be reserved for general citizens as opposed to a spillover from visitors to the housing project. But that's something that could be kicked around.
Thank you. So Heather has something in chat. I hear a lot of talk about more business growth. How do we do that and keep the quiet, peaceful town many of us are accustomed to? In my experience, extensive growth gets traded for small town living. Eric, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I think more businesses in town to an extent would be great, but definitely trying to keep the small town what I'd rather see. But I guess that's a bigger conversation to have in the future.
Yeah, something to explore further. Charlie, what are your thoughts on this? How do we balance growth and keep the small town feeling?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think the revitalization of our center of our town is really important. But to keep the character of the town in terms of the structures and businesses that might go in there. One thought I had as we've been speaking on this, there may be other small towns in the state that have addressed this issue and maybe have tried to lure businesses into their downtown area and develop plans on how to do this without destroying the character of the town or having too much traffic. So it is a balancing act, but I wouldn't necessarily rule out exploring this because of my strong belief that we've really got to get Putney back to where it was. There were a lot of small businesses there. They were doing well, and you still had that small town feel. And so I think, thinking about it in that way might advance the desirability of more vibrancy, but maintaining the character and, for want of a better word, quietude of the center of our town.
Great, thank you. And Tim, and Tim, did I miss you on an earlier round of questions? I hope I didn't shortchange you.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay.
I think that we're going to be seeing a lot of changes in Putney in the coming years if the proposed housing development goes forward. I think that's going to really probably in some ways change the focus of the village. from sort of the center of the town, more over towards the co-op. It's sort of hard for me to imagine that the sort of businesses that Putney might attract are going to draw so much traffic that it would greatly change the sort of nature of the village. I certainly would not want to see the village change drastically, but it's a little hard for me to imagine, a retail chain store coming into Putney. I'd imagine, like Charlie said, that perhaps we'd see more small businesses. Obviously, if there were to be a retail cannabis shop, maybe that would draw more traffic. But it's hard for me to imagine it would draw so much traffic as to really change the fundamental nature of the village.
Great, thank you. We did get a response from Mike Murwicki in chat. He says Putney has joined the county-wide broadband initiative that has created a nonprofit collaboration with the goal of broadband to all addresses in the county, primarily using federal stimulus/infrastructure funding, 3 to 5 year build out estimate. So Janice, I hope that's useful for you. Laura asks a question, Laura Chapman. Only one candidate can win this race. I'm wondering if the other two are committed to running if the increase to a 5-person select board passes. And so let's go in reverse order to what we just did. So that would be Tim, and then we'll go to Charlie and then Eric.
As of right now, yes. I can't. I guess if it were to pass, the upcoming election would be very soon. Or of all the questions passed, I should say, because I know there's 3 questions all related to expanding the select board. Certainly, if it went on longer than that, I'd have to sort of see where I was at and what was going on at that point. But as of right now, yes, I would commit to it.
Great, thank you, Tim. And Charlie, what about you?
Absolutely. I really want to be on the select board. I ran last year. I'm running again this year. If for some reason I don't prevail on the single seat, if this expansion from 3 to 5 passes, I would certainly like to be considered for one of those 2 additional seats. And if required a new election, that's fine.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. And Eric, what are you thinking?
Yes, absolutely. I'd be interested.
Good. That's very encouraging. All 3 candidates. Thank you, Laura, for that question. Are there any other questions out there? Somebody who hasn't spoken yet in chat or through the video camera, through the electronic? Mike Maruki also puts in chat planning for village growth, and he offers a link to vnrc.org smart growth. So Janice, yes.
Well, I've already spoken, so I'm happy to wait to see if there's anybody else that wants to ask a question.
It appears at the moment, Janice, that we have no new voices. So please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I have a question for Charlie.
Yes.
So it's nice to hear from you because I listened to the DRB meetings and I haven't really heard you weigh in on anything. I know you're new to that role, so I guess you're just, biding your time and learning. So it was really helpful for me tonight to hear your views on some things. So I'm assuming you're going to stay on the DRB if you do get elected?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. I don't know whether you're allowed to do that.
I believe so.
Yeah, you're right. I'm new to this, but it's so far in the last 10 months, it's been intriguing. Pip Bannister has been a wonderful mentor. But absolutely. I mean, I'm here in Putney to do what I can for the town. And if that means staying on the DRB, I'll stay on the DRB.
Janice, do you have another question?
I just want to follow up with that. So do you expect that you're going to be able to jump right in and or do you see another long learning curve where you're going to just be waiting and seeing and not really contributing your views for a while?
You mean on the select board?
Yeah, on the select board.
Well, obviously, if I haven't been on the board, there are things that I need to learn. But I've been at a number of meetings on quote unquote TV in this time of COVID, and I've gotten educated on a number of the issues. I've saved up the minutes for a number of the meetings in a little file here. No, I mean, I would certainly want to be a full-time member of the select board, and if I could contribute additionally on the DRB, I would like to do that as well. So no, I'm not, even though there's a learning curve, as I'm sure there has been for all select board members, except maybe Josh, who's almost emeritus at this point. I think I could learn, and I think I think I could be a good select person.
How do the
Great,
other
thank
two
you.
feel about that? What do they think about the learning curve? Do you attend select board meetings now? And what do you think your challenges will be joining a board?
Thank you, Janice. Yeah, Tim, do you want to answer this? And then we'll turn to
Sure.
Eric.
I would say until I sort of considered running the select board, which started around when I looked back at the minutes for, I think it was the December 8th meeting. Since then, I've been at least trying to make a regular appearance and listen in on select board meetings. I would say when I was on the school board, I certainly experienced that feeling of where there is a learning curve, and sometimes in the beginning, you do feel an urge to sort of listen and absorb and try to, find your way. And I think that can be an issue sometimes. I would certainly hope not to sort of sit back and be quiet. I think it's important that, especially on a 3-member board, that everyone speak. But I do think there most likely would be sort of ongoing issues that the current board is more aware of, than where I might hold back a little bit, simply in order to get a better understanding of what exactly is going on, rather than speaking without understanding.
Thank you, Tim. And Eric, what do you think about the learning curve? And are you attending select board meetings?
I have watched a few lately as when I can. And with anything, there's definitely be a learning curve.
Great.
Let's just start.
Yep. Thank you. So are there any other questions out there? One new message. Let's see. Here we have something, V squared, because of the nature of this is a public forum. So I'd ask that you're able to tell us your name and where you live in Putney. Vanessa Vadam, thank you very much. Vanessa's question, considering recent tax increases and more likely on the horizon, and Vanessa says parenthetically, sounds like as much as 17% increase. Wondering if you have ideas on how to offset the costs of the proposed 6th Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust project and ensuing tax increase. How do we grow and diversify the town without adding to the housing crisis with raised property taxes to pay for the project? And just to sum it up, she says, or they say, how do we create more housing without all but guaranteeing that existing tenants and homeowners will be priced out? Eric, can we start with you on that question about affordable housing, increased housing, and projected tax increases? And that's a question that might be useful to get some facts behind.
Yeah, I'd have to say I don't know a whole lot about the situation. I really can't speak to it too much.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Tim, do you have any thoughts on this particular question?
I mean, I think I'm probably in a similar boat to Eric. I wouldn't say that I know that much about the specific issue. I do recall from the school board, for a lot of people, any increase in taxes is going to be incredibly painful. And so I think most boards do their very best to not increase taxes, but I mean, I don't think I have a good answer for this one.
Great. Charlie,
Well,
can
I
you weigh in?
agree with both Tim and Eric on this in terms of the amount of real estate tax that we already pay. I'm not sure, quite honestly, the impact that this project would have on on the tax base or the tax collection in town. I mean, as I understand it, this project is not being funded by the town of Putney. Also, there may be folks who have decent enough jobs who live there, who can contribute taxes, if you will, based on the income that they earn. I don't know about the 17% figure. I haven't seen that, but certainly, as Vanessa points out, the town really will have a difficult time absorbing that. And so the select board would have to figure out a way to balance any potential tax increase, including perhaps, but not limited to, this affordable housing project. Admittedly, that was probably not a truly enlightened answer, but I wouldn't want to go forward with any conjecture here. My experience in Putney in the state of Vermont is that our taxes are relatively high, but we take care of our people. Unlike other states who may have no income tax, no sales tax, but then there's the other side of the fence, and that's affordability of our citizens to pay. And this is probably a perennial issue for all towns, not only in the state, but around the country. And so we're all grappling with this, but any perceived increase of that magnitude, we really need to look at and control.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. And so, yes, there has been a question about thoughts on the increase of the select board that was posed earlier, and everybody on the select board weighed in as being for an increase in the number of seats on the select board. Jaime, you have a question.
Yes. A couple things that I've been noticing in town and wondering about, and I don't have an answer to it, so it's a real curiosity. It has a lot to do with what you were talking about, Charlie, and others about how Putney has changed over the last number of years. We've been here for 10 years, and I've noticed a loss of businesses and just a general change in the availability of services. And so I've been curious about what as a community we could do to support folks on Main Street with helping create grant opportunities for home rehabilitation, or thinking about looking at economic strategies to attract businesses. I know a couple who just made a go of it have just recently closed, I'm imagining because of the complexities of COVID. So I'm a little bit curious, are there strategies that we could think about and collaborate with? That's everything from overgrown bushes that are could use a trim to folks who would love to invest in care of their homes, but would need capital and support for doing that, and additionally attracting businesses and looking at strategies to keep them here and vibrant. So I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about how as a community could we collaborate around that, and what role could a town play in a collaboration? Not that a town would have to solve it through town government.
Mm-hmm. Great. Tim, do you want to start with that? And then I'll go to Eric and then to Charlie.
Sure. I think with some of it, I'm a little uncertain how the select board would be involved exactly, but it does sound like something where, at least some of the suggestions, where some of these, the Relief Act funds would seem appropriate to me, but that's about the only thought I have.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Tim. Eric, do you want to weigh in on this? Of do you think the role of the select board is in terms of fostering collaboration for community development?
I honestly really don't know. I'd be, very interested in learning more on how it would affect and how they would play a part in it.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And Charlie, do you have any thoughts on this matter?
Well, I think that Jaime obviously is giving this a lot of thought, and I don't really have any immediate view or answer on how to accomplish this. But what I would like to do is to sit down with Jaime and others who are interested, have an interest in this, and kick it around and explore options. I don't know whether it's a select board issue at this point. I assume that the select board might very well get involved in passing on particular projects or plans that a group would come up with. But it's certainly vital, and it's probably related to some of the comments that I made. So I think this is really something that ought to be addressed, and I commend you, Jaime, in terms of thinking about this stuff. But beyond that, to be quite honest, I really don't have anything substantive to say at this juncture, unfortunately. But I gotta call it like it is.
Great. Okay. So I'm at the moment not seeing any new questions, which means we may be at the end of our public forum. I'm pausing briefly to see if anybody pops their hand up. I would like to say a big thank you to our 3 candidates who have done this. So I see there's a question in chat, and that's from Jaime about the 17% increase. And that seems directed specifically at Vanessa. But in terms of the evening, it's my sense, the sense of the moderator, that the forum is winding to a close. Any Laura or Jaime, do you wish some final remarks?
Thank you, Meg, for everything that you did for moderating this evening. That was really lovely. And thanks so much from the Putney Huddle for you, Charles, and Tim and Eric for running and for speaking and sharing your experiences and knowledge, and for your care of our community. That's really awesome. I would encourage folks to attend February 26th at 10 a.m., the Town of Putney information session. And one thing I'm really excited to hear about and talk about is the fair and impartial policing ballot question. So if folks are able to attend that, there'll be discussions, and there's people in the community who would love to talk to folks about that. And looking forward to, I'm sure, I do want to put in a plug for this. We had the school district candidate forum last night, and everyone needs to request their school district ballot in order to vote. So there's a wonderful candidate forum that BCTVD is putting up because it's also contested. So please consider requesting your school ballot in order to participate in that election as well. Laura, do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for attending, and we will do a quick follow-up on the Huddle's Facebook page about some of the questions that came up in here, and maybe doing a little bit of fact checking and sharing information. So I really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much, Meg. Thank you so much to the candidates, and I'm excited to see where this goes. Yay, democracy.
Great.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.